All right. So I loved this conversation with Gerard. I felt the entire time just this overarching sense of hope, of encouragement,
Yeah.
of prosperity. And when talking about something as negative or cynical as the prison system and incarceration, that wasn't what I expected to feel throughout the entire conversation.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, Shaka, A, did you feel the same way? And were you picking up on that tone and that undercurrent? And then B, were there specific parts of the conversation that sort of highlighted to you where that opportunity and encouragement and hope really stood out?
Yeah. Yeah. I think I did pick up on that. And Gerard is just so optimistic, working in what you might think is a pretty negative environment, right? This is not um, these are not positive things. The whole incarceration and prison system is not meant to be a feel good story, right? So yeah, nevertheless, he's really optimistic. Uh, to me, something he said kind of at the beginning and then at the end were really related, and it seems like he has opportunity as kind of his north star.
Hmm.
Um,
Definitely.
and he talked about that both in the prison system and how how he kind of came to the work in second chance education, but then he also talked about it when we asked him about differences between working in Florida and Virginia, and he said, well, I was able to work for governors who both prioritized opportunity. So I guess I gather that that for him is a real north star and probably helps keep him sort of focused on, like, why am I doing this work? How do I measure what matters? And
Hmm.
so I think that's related to the quality piece too, because, like, am I pursuing
Hmm.
solutions that increase opportunities for, now fill in the blank constituency, whether it's K-12 education or, K-12 kids, or correction officers, or incarcerated individuals. So yeah, I thought the opportunity piece was that stood out to me.
I think it's even clear that he's infusing it into the programs he's working on and the people with who that he's serving, the people that he's working with. Because when he gave the statistic, 22 people, 11 men, 11 women discussed their outcome or their hopeful outcome with education. And he sort of split it up into two categories. There's this internal desired outcome, and then there's this external desired outcome.
Yeah.
The articulation of the internal desired outcome. So this idea that their goal for education in prison is to create this self-efficacy, this self-identifiable
Yeah.
knowledge
Yeah.
that they own. I loved that because when he was explaining that, I was thinking to myself, imagine if every student had that. If every single student not only felt this like personal goal and focus to be educated for the sole purpose of making themselves better, um, what that would look like. And I don't know that all
Yeah.
students do not have that, but I definitely don't feel like that is a driving consideration. I want to go to school so I can make a lot of money, or I want to go to a great school so that I can have high notoriety in my social circles.
Right.
But what about just, I want to be educated, and starting from a young age, like having young
Yeah.
students recognizing they want to be educated because of what it's going to do to how they feel about themselves, how they can make decisions, how they can look and interact with other people because of what they've internally begun to identify and build.
Yeah. Well, it makes me think too of, we'll see if I can connect these like stray thoughts as we're just kind of
Mhm.
doing this follow up in real time here. It makes me think a little bit about um, just how, well, two things: how performative culture has gotten.
Mhm.
Meaning people do things. So this just last time I was in DC, actually, I went for a run, and as one does, I ran around the mall, and it's such a cool experience. It's really beautiful. I know I went up the Lincoln, up to the Lincoln Memorial, and um, there were, I guess it was just that weekend, but there were a ton of people taking pictures, like graduates taking pictures. This was not really a thing. I'm of a certain age that like the pictures that you took at graduation, you took at graduation, and then
Oh, so they were,
you
like, in their cap and gown at the
yeah,
monument.
they're in their cap and gown at the monument, just like one person. Sometimes it was a group of friends, but sometimes it was just one person with like some had serious like photo shoot, setups.
Mm.
And it just felt a little performative. And listen, I'm happy for the kids, but like, I mean, you didn't just cure cancer, right? You finished 12th grade. And, but so it just felt a little bit performative. And I'm also middle aged now. So I realize I'm a curmudgeon. But Um, I thought about that, and I thought about these sort of vanity metrics that often get talked about in school districts and public school districts. I know a district that on its one pager, what should be about the district, there was nothing academic on the one
Mm.
pager, but they did talk about how many miles the buses drive
Hmm.
and how many lunches are served every day. And I thought, and well, here's how I think it's related to this intrinsic piece that Gerard was talking about with some of the second chance students. Like when that intrinsic piece is really there, or when that's what the system is driving towards, then you're not talking about ticky tack things like how many bus rides do you give. The
Mhm.
point of education is not to serve lunches, right? Or to
Totally.
or to transport people to a building. It's to attain an education that works for you. And it seems like that's what the second chance students are have really grasped. It's not performative. They're not in a place where it's like where you can take cute Instagram pictures of
Mhm.
yourself in cap and gown. They're doing
Mhm.
it for themselves and for the promise of what an education brings. And I think a lot of that is missing actually in big districts. Well, in districts, I'll say around the country. Um, yeah.
So on this notion of performativeness, do you think vanity is a hindrance to quality?
Ooh, that's a good question. Is vanity a hindrance to quality? Um, I mean, I guess if your job is to be like a supermodel, probably not. Maybe those things are related. I don't know. I don't know. What do you think?
Because
How are you thinking about it?
so initially, as you were talking, I was thinking, I'm out, vanity's always a hindrance to quality. If you're concerned about how it looks, you're not concerned about
Mm,
how it's
mhm,
operating.
mhm,
I don't actually know that I believe that entirely because the more I thought about it in the last 30 seconds,
mhm,
I do think that there is some validity and there's some truth in um the saying look good, feel good, do good. Like I do think that if you are concerned to some extent about how something looks or how it's packaged or how it's put together, that does actually raise the quality of the product that
yeah,
you are assembling.
mhm,
Now, the extent to which you are preoccupied with the optics of something or how something looks, I think that line is very thin. And I think way too frequently we all cross too far over into the performative side.
yeah,
But I
yeah,
do think that there is value in putting things together and making sure your bow looks presentable, so to speak,
mhm,
and actually having that consideration, the consideration um, of how something looks or how something is presented, does increase the quality of what it is you're creating.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, I I think I would not wanna say unequivocally that, that vanity or how things look is a hindrance to the quality, right?
Mhm.
Um, I mean, I tend to think if it's purely the word vanity, I tend to that has a negative connotation to me. But
I think you're right. Yep.
yeah, yeah. But we care about how things look. I do think that matters, right? I mean, I do think that the facilities that, for instance, students um, learn in, that matters, and
Mhm.
it can affect their focus, and it can affect their outcome, right? So I do think there's a relationship there. But I guess what I want to say is like, if if you care about the way things look before you care about the quality, that seems to me to be the wrong order of operations. You know,
Okay.
like, because think about it um, in the meal context. Um, you go to what usually sets apart your like super nice highest tier restaurants and is that way the food is presented is often really really beautiful, right?
Mhm.
But if it's beautiful and it tastes terrible, they're not going to stay in business very long. It's going to be a problem,
Yep,
right? So I think you
absolutely.
got to get one right. Once you have honed the craft, then yeah, make it beautiful. But if you're serving a meal that looks great and then you upon taking the first bite it's just awful, I think that's not a recipe for success.
I would agree. I would agree. And thinking about barriers to quality or hindrances to quality, Gerard sort of spoke about, and I wish, I'm looking forward to having another conversation with him at some point because discussing what he would have thought or what he would have identified as the barriers to a high quality education would
Yeah.
have been really interesting. I think he sort of alluded to it when he said, the levers that people pull, resources.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
in my mind, I took, resources he would want more of to get a higher quality education. So right now we must, in certain situations, have a lack of resources. And it wasn't just money because
Right.
he identified money without, additional support is
Right.
just
He was
currency.
talking about quality teachers. He was talking about all sorts of things. Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. So I think the lack of those things is a barrier to a high quality education. This notion of teacher retention and
Yeah.
teacher support, um, the teacher pipeline, all of that stuff sort of immediately came to my mind as current barriers to high quality education. I wasn't sure if his mention of those things sparked any new ideas in
Well,
you.
it does spark an idea specific to, some of the work that I do, and that is, um, in most states, uh, well, in all states, the way that K-12 education is funded, it's on a there's a per pupil amount, right? You can figure out how much
Mhm.
money, dollar resources is associated with each student, right? So a student here gets about $14,500 to attend school, whatever. Okay. In some places, it's really high. I mean, I think you've got places in the country, New York, maybe DC, as high as almost $30,000 per pupil.
Yep,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah. Okay. So one of the things that is also true is that in almost every state, if a student participates in a program that lets them go to a charter school or use a voucher or an education savings account or a tax credit scholarship program,
Mhm.
they get less money. And I would say, to Gerard's point, resources do matter, right? So on the one hand, I think that I'm going to say this. I think the choice matters a lot, and the ability to choose an educational setting that's right for for that child. That to me is paramount. But if you get to make that choice and you only get to spend half as much as is being spent in the other setting, that to me is a bit of a false choice, right? It's not fit.
Mm.
There's actually now you've got a fairness problem.
Mhm.
And so I do think that resources matter. So I think like when policymakers are looking at, at these new programs and new laws, or even revisiting existing ones, I do think like, how do we get to some parity of resources so that parents are making like choices?
So, do you think parents know that right now, that funding inequity exists and that they actually
Yeah.
aren't making like choices, like, that they're
Um,
not choosing that?
I think they probably do not know, and and well, I think I think many don't know. What's interesting is I know that some do, because I've heard from some. They say, "Hey, how come my child is getting a voucher and the vouchers were $6,000, but I heard that my district, if they say in the district school, they'd be getting 12,
Mhm.
and they still make the choice."
Mhm.
And that to me is super interesting, right?
Mhm.
Um, yeah, when you're willing to do something that gets less resources because you think that it's a better fit, that's really telling.
And oftentimes, I would go so far as to even say they think they're getting a better outcome. I mean, that would be a driving
Well,
consideration
totally. If they're
in
making
their
that choice,
decision.
I think
Yeah,
you kind of have to assume that, right? Yeah.
right,
Yeah.
right. So, another, something that Gerard brought up is, what makes a quality life? And if, there are some key considerations that parents are choosing as a quality life, where their children go to school, regardless of the
Yep.
equal funding, which it is not. Um, their factors are different, and what they're choosing to focus on is different than, and it's not solely based on funding and equal resources.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I thought that was interesting for sure.
Yeah. Well, I think we could talk to Gerard and about the stuff that he's done. Frankly, we may have to have him back because we could talk to him for hours. Um, Super interesting stuff. I definitely learned more about these kind of second chance opportunities, and also really interesting that now incarcerated individuals can use Pell Grants again. Right? I think that's a pretty cool opportunity because, as he said, if 95% of folks are going to come out and do something, let's make that something positive, and I believe folks should have opportunities, and that there can be like reconciliation. And so let's have people with opportunities when they come out of institutions, for sure.
I
Yeah.
agree. I mean, there's definitely a movement here happening. You've got people like Gerard, you've got people like Kim Kardashian, all sorts of people who are focused on this prison reform and this idea of second chances. And to Gerard's point, you can be tough on crime and focused on time, meaning how can you maximize
Yeah, so good.
the 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 time that you have where people are serving the punishment for their crime and maximizing the efficacy of that time in prison so that when they leave, which he said 95% of people will, when they leave, they don't become one of the 75% of people that he said come right back.
Yeah.
And um, figuring out how to navigate that situation and prevent it seems like a worthy cause and clearly one that Gerard is focused on and sort of excelling in.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's great to see that work. All right. Well, this has been our breakdown of that episode. Yeah, I look forward to doing it again soon, Caitlin.
Awesome. Thanks, Shaka.
All right. See ya.
Bye.